Christian beats Pelosi. Off the wall to Harris. Harris has got Pelosi. Harris to Pelosi. Shot. He scores! Chris Pelosi!
And Poitras trying to drive in on that right wing side. Poitras in. Scores! Matt Poitras in overtime.
Locmelis took it right off his stick. Sends one through. They score! First career goal for the Bruins draft pick, Locmelis.
Back to the blue line. Cowan has it, looking for the return feed. Cowan lets it go back to the point. Shot!
Those were without all of their World Junior guys for that against Simon Fraser. BC played him Sunday. Good pass ahead. There's Jellvik. He scores! Didn't need an exhibition.
Will come up with it. Walsh flips it out to center. Now McKinney gives chase with Harrison. Harrison to the backhand. Score! A deft touch.
Watch out. Nelson steals. Walks in. Scores! 6-2. Jackson Nelson has the hat-trick.
In across the line. Bruin wins that back. Now he's going to waltz it.
Welcome in, folks. This is the first episode of the official Dom.Hockey Podcast, premiering right now on 6342 Productions. I am joined by the one, the only Dominic Tiano himself, as you will see us on What's Brewing every Tuesday here on the same network. Dom, how are you doing this Sunday evening? Are you ready to talk some Bruins prospects?
I am. As you know, I've been waiting for this, Chris. But, as we were talking before we started streaming here, forgot we were going up against NFL football. So it is what it is. But we'll supply some information, and people can always download and watch later on and get the information.
Yep, the show will be posted on YouTube. Obviously, we're streaming live on Twitch right now as well as YouTube, and it'll be available on all your podcast platforms, whether you're an Apple user, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you can find podcasts. This pod will be available tomorrow, and then also on YouTube. We do have Bear Force One joining us already. This is Dom's first own podcast. But he's been on many before, as I know you know. So, Dom, welcome to the podcasting world. And, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to going over a lot of the Bruins prospects, the guys that people have questions on. I know you wanted to start this first week off with a certain group of prospects. I'll let you share that, and we'll pull up your little graphic and start to go in order here.
Yeah, so tonight we're going to look at the prospects outside professional hockey. So not the Providence guys. We're going to look at the guys in the NCAA, the CHL, and over in Europe, and the USHL, and talk a bit about those. Next week, people have heard us talk about it on the What's Brewing podcast many a times. We'll get into expected production from them. And then week 3, will be towards the end of the month. We'll pretty much know who's going to be in Providence and who's going to be in the NHL. And we'll discuss the Providence guys at that time. We'll go through each individual player. I know there's going to be a lot of questions. To keep some order to it, if you keep your questions to the players we're talking about at that moment, instead of jumping up and down the list, it will keep some sort of form flow to what we're doing. And one other thing I wanted to touch on, Chris, and again, you and I have both have talked about it over the last few months about this on the What's Brewing podcast, is I don't care the national writers or the national media is saying about the Bruins prospects. And I'm sure you don't as well, Chris. I don't want to put words in your mouth. We are here to give you an honest and try to be unbiased look at the Bruins players. We all know that the top end, which is what the national media looks at, the blue chip prospects, the top 100 in the league, and base their rankings on that. We, Chris and I, intend to go further. Look at everybody, not just the top end prospects. And I've said it for a long time now. You give me the Bruins bottom part of the prospect pool, and I will put it up against anybody else's in the league anytime.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. It's we don't have a Kevin Korchinski. We've got a Kristian Kostadinski. Like, we have the big project guys that you're hoping for Flyers on, because that's what a contending NHL organization has to deal with. When you're not making first round draft picks, you're not finishing in the top half of the draft, you're not going to get your Connor Bedards, your Braden Points. Like, yeah, every once in a while a guy might fall in the draft. And that's where we've had some successes in the past. A Brad Marchand, for example. But if you look at even when Brad Marchand was drafted, his path was not made for him. He went out and carved it himself. I mean, the guy worked his way up to a fourth line role, and then from there has become one of the top left wingers in the game. And if you look at the scouting reports from the national guys back then, and you can see it in some of the other guys, like a UC Saros, for instance, too small, the size isn't there, yada, yada, all that crap. It's not always about the size of the player. It's about how they perform. What do they do? What are the intricacies of their game? And that's what we're hoping to kind of dissect a little bit here. Let's see. We got Matrix already jumping in. Cameron, congratulating you on the podcast launch. First podcast to go with your website, which a lot of our viewers are quite familiar with. And also we want to offer some additional insight. For instance, Dom, did you catch who the Utah Hockey Club brought in for their training camp?
Yes, Reed Dick.
Former Bruins prospect, goaltending prospect, Reed Dick.
Winnipeg also had him at their development camp.
Yep. So in some instances, keeping some eyes on some of the guys that we've talked about, even though they won't necessarily break through with the Bruins, just kind of touching base on some of those. I know a lot of people were asking about Reed Dick in the past. So, Dom, I know you have a graphic. You want me to pull that up and we can start at the top here?
Yeah. Well, put that up. This is
I'll let you explain it.
Yeah, this is something I've done over the last few years. And basically, it's my belief on a player's chances of playing in the NHL or for the Bruins. And a lot goes into it. Like, for example, we'll start with Oskar Jellvik because he's at the top of the list. He's a player I watched even before the Bruins drafted him. So it's, how is the progression gone? How is his learning curve gone? A lot of things play into it. Is he meeting expectations? Is he exceeding them? Is he falling short? And of course, the biggest thing on whether he'll play for the Bruins or not, or for any of these guys, is their contractual situation, along with who's ahead of them, who do they have to jump, what's their position look like at the National Hockey League level, and for instance, left side defense is going to be locked up for once Mason Lohrei signs his next contract for the next 5 years. So is there an opening there for any of these guys? Things like that. So just because they're not in the will play for the Bruins category doesn't mean that they won't. It's just their contractual situation right now isn't in a position where we can definitively say they will. That said, and we'll start with Oskar Jellvik. I believe he will play for the Bruins just because left wing is going to be a positional need for them in the very near future. And right now, he's their most talented prospect on the left side. He had an absolutely fabulous season last year with Boston College. I know I had predicted for him to have a massive amount of points, and he exceeded them. And a lot of people say to me, well, that's because he played with Cutter Gauthier on a line with him. And I look at it and I say, okay, but so did Andre Gasseau. And why did Gasseau's production drop last season, playing most of the year with the two of them, whereas Jellvik's went up? I think Jellvik is in for a big year. I think it'll be his last year in the NCAA. I believe he will turn pro as soon as his season is done. Sign either an AHL deal to finish out the year in Providence or an NHL deal. And he's probably one and done in Providence. That's what his trajectory is right now.
Yeah, I mean, with one more season over at BC, last year he was a point per game player. I believe it was 42 just over in 41 games, something like that. The fact that he can play left wing and center, like you said, positional need in the short term, a big factor in that is going to be what a guy like Brad Marchand does. And I know people want to sit there and make that argument. Well, he played with Cutter Gauthier. Okay, well, in the NHL, he's going to have NHL-ready talent to play with as well. So I'd almost rather see him play better with better players at a young age, because that means when he's put out there with a David Pastrnak opposite him on the other wing, he's going to be able to keep up with him. It's a better, honestly, in my opinion, almost a better trajectory because he can keep up with guys who are almost, I don't want to say guaranteed NHLers, but everybody's talking about Cutter Gauthier and what he'll be able to do at the National Hockey League level. The fact that Jellvik can keep up with him proves just how good he is for the Bruins.
Exactly. I believe we're going to see him this season turn into a driver, a play driver for his line. Whether he plays with Gasseau or not on a regular basis is yet to be seen. Gasseau played a game on Friday, I believe it was, where he was in the middle. Jellvik actually took a couple of shifts with Dean Letourneau on his line. But it doesn't appear that we'll get to Letourneau in a minute, but it doesn't appear that Letourneau is going to start out on the fourth line. I think they're going to start him on line 3 or possibly even line 2. But Jellvik is going to be a driver for BC this year, and he's going to surpass everything he did last season, even without Gauthier there.
Definitely a player that if you watch any NCAA hockey, I mean, you probably watch a little bit of BC. He should stand out for you this season. I know I'm excited to watch him specifically. I mean, he's going to be electric regardless of who his line mates are. He definitely has the talent, the vision, to support his teammates on the ice. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do. I do wonder how the Marchand contract situation affects a guy like Jellvik, because while we're saying right now that it's a left side organizational need, you've got Marchand on the left side. Luckily, beyond that, you don't have a ton, but it also kind of depends on where you see a guy like Trent Frederick in a couple seasons. It's Pavel Zacha, he's got 3 years left on his contract. Like, okay, where do you put Zacha? Where do you put a guy like Jellvik as Zacha's contract comes up at the age of 31? So like there's going to be some maneuvering in there, but what Jellvik offers is those options, because at some point putting in an ELC contract in this lineup and being able to shed almost $5 million in cap space, that's money that can go to a guy like Mike Mason Lohrei when you're trying to re-sign him.
Right. And, you know, Frederick's contract is up too. So, there's questions there. I think there's a path for Jellvik to be in Boston after two seasons. And I think he's capable of taking it. And I'm very confident that it'll be with the Bruins and they're going to hold on to this kid.
Yeah, I mean, unless something comes up where he's a prized possession for a team that wants to make a deal, I would hang on to him too to see where he can go for the Bruins. He's also young enough that there's no need to dump the guy. But he's a chip that you have that you can kind of help go all in on if you're that good and ready to make a run. But I like the idea of hanging on to him simply because his ceiling can be quite high.
And for 149th pick, 5th round, you know, in 2021, he could very well be the steal of the 5th. I think he will be the steal of the 5th round in just a couple of seasons. So I expect big things from him. I'm going to watch him a lot again this year. And, you know, I think if you get the opportunity to watch BC games, watch it and see for yourself that this guy is going to be an NHL player.
Now we'll move down to Dean Letourneau, who's the next guy on this list for you. You have him kind of in that NHLer, but not for the Bruins category, almost smack dab in there for him. I recall as the draft pick was being made, a lot of people were talking about him being a long-term project, a couple years away. Obviously, I still believe in those types of things, but his ceiling is quite high. And you say probably not with the Bruins. So I want to have you kind of explain that for some folks. That way they're, you know, because like a lot of people have been excited about this pick. You got him for the Linus Ullmark deal. So if you don't mind first starting why you don't think he'll be playing with the Boston Bruins.
Well, I think he will. It basically comes down to the contractual situation with him. Look, I watched Letourneau play twice, twice last season in high school hockey. I watched his game the other night, and he's very green, very, very green. But you can see that there's talent there. His floor says NHL player. His ceiling says NHL player. So even if he doesn't reach his ceiling and he just reaches his floor, he'll be an NHL player. So we got to remember he's jumping an extra level of hockey this season. He was supposed to be in the USHL. He's jumping straight to college. So we don't know how he's going to handle that. And we don't know if he's going to be capable of handling that. And everything could derail, but the talent is there. And I feel confident in saying he's an NHL player, but I need to see something at least this year. I need to see something that he's adjusting to the transition of jumping a level of hockey, and then I will be much more confident in saying, yeah, the Boston Bruins are going to hold on to this guy.
Makes sense. So I agree. I think he screams NHL caliber player. I think a lot of people, they're going to have the reins pulled on them simply because people are going to have to. I mean, we're already seeing the same type of thing with Fabian Lysell. People want to call him a bust because they drafted him a couple years ago. People forget that he's 21 right now. Dean Letourneau is 18. And as you mentioned, he's going from high school level hockey basically to college level hockey. And that's a fairly significant jump because there was no juniors or anything like that in between. So
Right.
effectively taking 2 steps up.
Right. He's going from playing with boys to playing with men.
Right.
Basically.
Now, physically at 6'7", 215, he's there physically. And what I love about Letourneau, and some people saw it when he was at development camp, he can skate. He's got some speed. His foot speed is solid. Probably could use a little improvement on some minor edge work technique and stuff. But again, it was development camp. So I don't really know how much everyone was really going all in on focusing on edge work. But, when you have the ability to skate and you have a 6'7" frame and you're filled out, it might take you some time. And so I won't be crushing this kid if in his freshman season at BC, he doesn't blossom into this Oskar Jellvik point per game kind of player. It might take him a year to kind of get his head together at that level. And that's okay.
It's perfectly fine.
Can he keep up with the game? Is he doing the right things that it's just a matter of making minor adjustments going into year 2? I would not be surprised to see this kid play 3 seasons at BC and then a season in the minors, and then he's ready for the NHL. You're probably talking that type of trajectory at a minimum.
Yeah, 4 years minimum.
And so with that, that's when you're going to have to look at some of the other situations. Coyle's got 2 years left on his deal. So maybe Letourneau can look to be a replacement for Charlie Coyle down the road if you can have another 1 or 2 year stopgap kind of center, a third line center for his first year, something to that effect. Obviously, between now and then, there's going to be a lot of change in the center position at the NHL level. And that may dictate whether or not they look to shop him around to another team to try to get someone who can help them win now.
Yeah, I'm just not ready to call him the Bruins' top prospect at this point. I know a lot of publications out there have.
I think that's crazy to do. The guy hasn't even played a game of college hockey.
He's played 2 games of junior hockey last season. He's a high school hockey player. Let's let him develop. Let's let him take his time, and let's see where this journey takes us. Because obviously, I'm hoping he reaches his potential. But like I said at the beginning, we're here to be honest with you, and try and give you an unbiased opinion. And that's what we're doing. It's like, let's not rush. We've seen the Nail Yakupovs. We've seen the Alexander Daigs. We've seen the Alex Galchenyuks type players in the past. So let's hope Letourneau is not one, but let's play it slow because the Bruins are going to play this one slow.
Yeah, and they have a benefit right now where they're able to do that. Their NHL club is competitive. They're not trying to rush people along, and they have the option to let him percolate and improve at the lower levels. So I really look forward to watching him go through that process because he's the type of player that can really exemplify what proper development can do for someone. So moving on to the next person on your list, just a little behind Letourneau, you have Andre Gasseau. I will let you start us off on Andre Gasseau and just kind of let you get some of your thoughts out there on where you think he will end up, how he's going to do.
It's kind of funny that the first three players on there are all Boston College players, eh?
Says something about the school, that's for sure.
Yeah. So I'm a fan of Gasseau. He had, like I mentioned earlier, his production dropped a little bit last season, but I'm expecting a bounce back this year. Another guy who can play down the middle or on the wing. I think his game is best suited for the wing right now because skating needs some work, but I saw improvement in it last year. I'm curious to see. He looked good the other night. I'm curious to see him when the games get up to speed, what his skating is like and whether he's continued to put the effort in there. I think the only thing that would hold him back from the NHL would be skating. Everything else is there. The size, the shot, the willingness to engage. He would fit in with the new type of Boston Bruins that they've overhauled their team with this season. And I'm like I said, I'm sure that his production will bounce back and he'll have an even a better season than last year. And, it's his third year. Excuse me. I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes all 4 years at BC.
Yeah. I mean, he's a player though that they can afford to kind of let stay at BC. He can work on, going for his degree. There's no rush for him. He's got a good shot, so he's for a late round pick, there's no rush, big body, 21 years old. I just, you can't write a player like that off no matter how much people want to. I will point out we got Kevin joining the program as well. What is up for you, Kevin? Welcome into the Dom.Hockey Podcast, airing live and its debut episode. Right now, again, going over Andre Gasseau and kind of his projections. I think Gasseau kind of fits one, like you said, the bigger body style that they're looking for. He also kind of fits like in that sense that if something comes up where you pull the trigger on a deal that moves an Oskar Jellvik out of town because you're bringing in someone to help you try to win now, Gasseau, a couple years down the line, could fill in where you wanted Jellvik to go. So, it adds to that whole options thing that Sweeney likes to have for his repertoire, if you will, something that I think should be praised for him. Kevin says that he is working late on a Sunday, enjoying some football, but will be listening to us. Absolutely, Kevin. Always enjoy doing the shows, especially even though we know you are often eating during them. Hopefully it's good food. So with that, the next player on the list is a super interesting guy because of how the Bruins acquired him. Up next, Jonathan Myrenberg. He was a player that was kind of thrown in the deal that sent Jack Studnicka over to the Vancouver Canucks. And he's still over in Sweden, I believe, and has to be there for a couple more seasons based off of the agreements in place. Do you want to explain those real quick to folks before we dive too far into the 50% chance of making NHL ranking that you've kind of projected him at?
Yeah, he's an NHL player. I love the guy. I love watching him play and everything. And he's basically been playing against men in the Swedish Hockey League as a 19 and 20-year-old and has held his own. Unfortunately, he signed a 2-year contract extension with Linköping HC. My Swedish isn't that great, sorry. But
that's how I would have gone with it.
Yeah, and the Bruins only hold his rights till June 1st of next year. So they have the option to buy out his contract and have him come over, and then the whole NHL IHF transfer agreement. I'll be honest with you. Even I don't fully understand it, and I've read it 100 times. So it's going to cost mega dollars for the Bruins to bring him over next season before they lose his rights. And I'm not sure that they can convince Charlie Jacobs or Jeremy Jacobs to pay the money. And that's what it boils down to. The agreement is basically to try and keep Swedish players not drafted in the first round. And Myrenberg was drafted in the 5th round in 2021. But it's basically to keep younger players in Sweden until they're 24 years of age. So we'll see. But I believe he's an NHL player. Like I said, he's held his own playing against men as a 19 and 20-year-old. His brother is the goaltender on the team, who signed an extension in Sweden the same time Jonathan did. So that's probably another reason why he's still there. And who knows, maybe if the Bruins are looking for a goaltender, they can sign his brother as a free agent too. But that's a story for another day.
It's certainly an interesting story if they go through with that.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm still not sure why the Canucks gave up on him. Whether this was a PJ Axelson telling Don Sweeney, we got to get this guy, because he was ranked as their 3rd or 4th best prospect at the time of the trade. So, interesting. Maybe the Canucks looked at it and said, you know what? We can't wait 4 years for this guy. We'll give him to you.
Yeah. It's certainly an interesting position because he is a right side defenseman. And while this year they definitely have that covered, this year they have it'll be McAvoy, Carlo, and Peak. You can also have Wotherspoon play on that side. The part that makes it interesting, like you said, is it's going to cost him some money to get him over here before his contract expires or his rights expire. And at that point, you'll have to sign him to a new contract. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. I think he's NHL ready. I mean, he's already got an adult-sized body, 6'3", almost 200 pounds. He's 21. What has he played international games-wise? Almost 70, almost 80 games internationally?
I'm not sure.
It's a high number.
Yeah. I think you're confusing him with Locmelis.
Oh, maybe it was Locmelis.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about them both a lot, but I'm pretty sure he's played a handful of international games at least.
Mm-hmm.
And
well,
so,
he was the last cut as a 20-year-old for Sweden's national team for the World Championships.
Oh, that's right. That was him. Okay, it must have been Locmelis we were talking about. It must have been Locmelis we were talking about.
Yeah.
But either way, he does have the size of an adult playing with adults, even though he's only 21. Let me just see here. Cameron asks, and this is kind of the question, is he a possible replacement for Andrew Peak? That comes down to how much is it going to cost to get him out of Sweden? Because like you said, if it's going to cost him a lot, the Jacobs family may not want to pay that. Now, if another team is willing to pay it because they want to get him in the NHL right away, and they're a little bit more desperate to do that, maybe a team like Vegas, we know they're willing to fork over cash as needed to try to remain competitive. It might be a situation where you're able to trade him to a team that's more willing to pay that fee to get him over here, but you're still open and thin on that right side going forward. Now, you have Myrenberg, you have Mason Langenbrunner, and that's about it right now, at least in the non-pro level. You have a couple guys that we'll talk about more when we get to Providence and other areas, but I think Myrenberg is your best option. It's just a matter of what that fee is going to look like, and can the Jacobs bend on being willing to pay that?
Yeah, because by the time they pay the transfer fees, buy out the contract, it's going to be over $1 million.
And it's easy for us to say, oh, just do whatever it takes. But at the same time, there's a lot more math to it.
Yeah.
So let's see. Up next, but he'll still be fun to watch. So if you get some time to watch Myrenberg, he's definitely worth it. And I do think that definitely makes it a 50-50 chance as to whether or not he makes it to the NHL. I'm sure he will at some point. He's only 21 years of age. It's just a matter of when, based on that massive fee to bring him over before he's 24. So up next, though, we do have Chris Pelosi. I'll let you decide where you want to start off on with Pelosi here.
Yeah, I'm actually going to do Pelosi and Hendrickson at the same time because
sure.
I said it after the Bruins drafted Hendrickson. I believe it was 124th overall in 2023, 4th round. And Pelosi went 92nd in the 3rd round. And I said at the time that I probably would have reversed the 2 picks if it were up to me. So I would have made Hendrickson the 3rd round pick, Pelosi the 4th round pick. Doesn't matter because they got both anyway. Hendrickson had, to me, an excellent season. And I like him on the wing better than I do down the middle, even though he can play both. And I think last year, for the most part, he spent all his time on left wing. In the summer, he was at Team USA's camp for the World Junior Championships coming up in December and January, as well as Pelosi. The two of them were both there. I think, and I'm not even sure why, but I think Hendrickson is going to find the transition to the NCAA. I believe he's going to Minnesota. Yep. I think he's going to find the transition easier than Pelosi will, who's going to Quinnipiac. And it remains to be seen whether Pelosi will be playing down the middle or not, or whether he's going to be moved to the wing. I think based on what the team looks like, he'll be playing down the middle. But, they were teammates for most of last year. And when Hendrickson got traded to Dubuque, he continued to produce at the pace he was doing all season with Pelosi, whereas Pelosi's actually dropped after the trade. So I'm a little higher on Hendrickson than I am on Pelosi, but I both think that they are on the cusp of proving that they're bona fide NHL players. Now, I'm not talking first, second line. I think, we're looking at third line regulars at the NHL level.
Yeah, and obviously that's the ceiling that you're projecting for them right now. Once we see what they look like in the NCAA, maybe that adjusts and changes up or down. But one thing that I will say between Jellvik and Letourneau and Gasseau and now Hendrickson and Pelosi, you're looking at guys who can play center or the left side. Like, I know there was a lot of talk about how the team was, quote unquote, never looking for Patrice Bergeron's replacement and all that type of stuff. I think that's a little bit of a false narrative, simply because you were never going to replace Patrice Bergeron, and they knew that.
Mm-hmm.
What we're looking at here in these guys is another wave of guys who can replace and take over in place of Marchand and Bergeron and Krejci as they move on, as they retire. These guys were going to take some time, and unfortunately, it just seems like the timeline didn't add up as perfect as we would have liked. Now you have a guy like Elias Lindholm, you got Pavel Zacha, who looked like a perfect bridge guy, kind of dropped off a little bit. So you have to be able to adjust on the fly. That's what we've seen at the NHL level. But these are the guys who were in the drafted positions to fill in the left side. Like, you don't need an elite right winger because you have David Pastrnak locked up for almost a decade.
Right.
Yes, you want a guy like Fabian Lysell. The problem with a guy like Lysell is if he's going to want top 3 minutes on the right side and you already have Pastrnak there, well, now you're in a position where you have to trade him. It never hurts to trade talent because you're going to get talent in return, or a good solid return. But that's why we're not seeing him draft a bunch of guys who can play the right side. We're looking at the guys who can replace the left side, replace down the middle, and be good on draws, be responsible defensively, because you already have guys who can score. And finding a guy who can score, believe it or not, isn't as hard as it sounds.
Not through the draft, no.
Right.
No.
It's just a matter of paying the price to go and get that player.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can fill in the other spots around the goal scorer, and then you go, all we need now is a goal scorer, great. Now you go get him. And he's the complementary piece to everybody else. So it's all in a draft plan. Like you've said before, the Bruins never think about only this year. They're always thinking next year, the year after, 2, 3, 4 years from now, and they're looking at a much larger picture.
And you have to.
Absolutely. Next on the list is finally Mr. UMass himself, Dan's Locmelis, who has great potential, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You know, and as you mentioned earlier, he's got 78 games of international experience as a 20-year-old. Drafted in the 4th round, 119th overall in 2022, I believe.
I believe so. I'm going to double check on that.
Yeah. Another guy I watched before the Bruins drafted him. It's oddly familiar, the path Locmelis has taken as a Latvian who went to Sweden to play in the J20. The path he and Oskar Jellvik have taken is quite similar. Their production at each level has been quite similar. Just like Jellvik, I was not the slightest bit concerned with the numbers that Locmelis put up last year with UMass. Doesn't worry me one bit. I fully expect him to have a breakout season this year, just like Jellvik did. If I have any concern about Locmelis, it's how he fits in with the Bruins now, because you've got to think Lindholm is there for 7 years. You have Patra there, who is going to be there a long time if he's successful. The same with Johnny Beecher. We don't know whether Trent Frederick will be around or not, and whether he'll be down the middle or on the wing. So there isn't a lot of openings for Locmelis down the middle over the next half dozen years. So can they play him on wing? He hasn't played very much wing. I don't believe he played anything with UMass last year on the wing, if I'm recalling correctly. He was strictly third line center. And I don't recall in the J20, other than maybe a shift here or shift there on the power play, where he played the wing. So, you know, I'm just worried about where he's going to fit in moving forward.
Yeah, finding a spot for him in the lineup is definitely going to be probably the hardest thing. Let me just see. I'm trying to look at his size comparison to. So right now you got Poitras, who's 5'11", about $180. He's put on weight, so he's probably a little closer to 190, 195 at this point. Whereas Locmelis, 6'1", 180. We'll have to see how he comes in the season. Right now, down the middle, I do wonder what the long-term plan is with Frederick. He can play both wings, so that wouldn't be a bad thing. The fact that Zacha kicks over to the wing, also not necessarily a bad thing. It's the same kind of problem that you're running into with Oskar Jellvik, wing or center. It's kind of funny because it sounds like in the next 2-3 years they could have that log jam of youth in the left wing center positions. Trent Frederick, though, is a guy that you could get something before his contract is over if you were to trade him. So this year is going to be crucial for that. You know, if you're kind of sort of contending, but not, he could be that NHL talent that you are able to send out the door. The problem that I have with that is the size that he brings. He would make a great complementary left wing for a guy like Matthew Poitras. But that's when you sit there and go, well, Poitras's got the talent to be a top 6 center, and you go Lindholm, Poitras. Of course, the one name we haven't mentioned is Georgi Merkulov in all this. So this year's opening camp, as we get ready to go into the season, is going to be crucial, because a guy like Merkulov, if he comes in and he shows that he's NHL ready and he can bump a guy like Trent Frederick, I don't want to say off the roster, but to a point where you don't need him anymore, you could trade Trent Frederick at that point. But now you're going to look at size, and Merkulov, if he's better on the left wing, but you'd rather have a future line with Jellvik and Frederick and Geeky, for instance, or Poitras in the middle because of the size that they have to offer. Like, these are decisions that are going to have to be made, but you hope to have to make them, because if Merkulov comes in and he's a nothing burger, well, you're nowhere off. You still have to wait for a guy like Jellvik or Locmelis to emerge and become pro, get through their AHL pro time, and push for an NHL roster spot. So now you're forced to give a guy like Frederick a bridge deal and spend more, and that's why a camp like this year's is going to be so crucial for the Bruins overall.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, a lot plays into their decision making. You know, he could become a valuable trade chip himself in a year or two. So we'll see. He's got some bodies to jump. You know, to get to the Bruins. You know, I mean, you think about. I think Jellvik's a lock for left wing. He hasn't played much center, but you look at already at the NHL level, or could be, is Poitras and Beecher. Lindholm's obviously locked up. Gasseau's a guy that can play in the middle. Pelosi's a guy who can play in the middle. Hendrickson's a guy who can play in the middle. Like Schmaltz has got bodies to jump.
Yeah.
And you know, I love the player, and you know, he may be the one that's out because he's what, 5'11"? Did you look it up?
Yeah, he's no, he's 6'1". Poitras is the one that's 5'11".
6'1". I don't think Locmelis is that big.
He could be a short 6'1". I mean, we know that players don't always accurately measure. So
I'd be surprised if he's 6'1", but you know,
the other factor too that we haven't mentioned at this point too is Poitras left shot. Lindholm, I believe, is a right shot. Like you're gonna want to play around with that, and of course, the next guy on our list is Riley Walsh, who can also play down the middle, but he's a right shot himself.
Ryan Walsh. Let's not get everybody angry with us with Riley.
Did I say Riley?
Yeah.
I meant to say Ryan. My bad. Ryan Walsh.
Yeah. 6th round pick in 2023. It's, you know, he was a draft re-entry, and a lot of people were kind of hum and haw and didn't know how he would produce at his first year at Cornell University. But you know, I have a model to predict points, and he was pretty much bang on. So he achieved what I thought he would achieve, and he overachieved by a lot of people's definitions in his first year in Cornell. So, but he's another guy who played prep school hockey, moved on to the USHL, and has always been able to produce. It doesn't mean he's going to be a guaranteed NHL player, but he has a shot, and that's exactly the type of player you want to take a chance on in the 6th round. You know, he was playing with players more his age last season against with Cornell, and against players more his age, being an overage draft pick. So, you know, I'm not surprised that he can produce. We'll see how he does this year. You know, he looks like he could be an NHL player, but there's no guarantee with him at this point. We have to see how he continues to progress. But like I said, that's exactly the type of player you want to take a shot at in the 6th round. And
188 overall.
Yeah.
Again, he's a right shot, so you know there will be some value if you can develop him, if you can show that he has that potential, the growth in his game, step by step by step. You know, it's a project, but it's also, again, the same thing that we were talking about before. If you move some of your better prospects in the current day, you're going to need a fresh batch behind them. And so while you have these guys that are maybe 2-3 years away in your Jellviks, your Pelosi's, you know, Letourneau's a little further, but that's where you have guys like Letourneau and Walsh, where they're not 2 or 3 years away. They might be 3 or 4 years away. It's depth amongst your prospects. That way there, if you do trade someone, you're not waiting 5 years to replace them. If you trade Fabian Lysell right now, you have to go find another right wing some other way.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it. And so, again, back to this training camp, if he comes in and he's able to solidify the right side, it changes so much for you. If not, now you have to move a guy like Frederick over or bump a guy like Morgan Geekie up, and you have options. Yes, that's one of the things that, like I said, Don Sweeney always leaves himself open for, is if plan A doesn't work, what are plans B through X? However, behind Fabian Lysell, you don't really have someone else in right wing spot who might be making a jump for it a year from now or 2 years from now, you have to go find that guy much sooner than you thought.
Yeah, which it also changes your drafting philosophy going forward.
Right. Now, maybe it's always possible that someone makes an unexpected jump, like a Jonathan Morello or a Casper Nassen, someone like that. Maybe a guy like Dan's Locmelis decide you say, hey, can you try him on the right side, see what he looks like while he's there in college, and it just clicks and he can do it, and he can just jump up your draft board or your depth board that way. That's the kind of guy that, that's the type of thing, again, Brad Marchand is a great example. This is the player we need you to be. Okay, great. I'm going to do that. And then as the need changes, the player changes along with the need, and he works his way up your board. All of these guys have the ability to do that. It's just a matter of, can they and do they have to?
Exactly.
Now, next on your board, or was there anything else you had on Walsh?
No, we can move on to.
So next is Elliott Groenewold.
Yeah. 4th round pick this summer. Bruins actually traded up to draft him. No, wait. He
was the 4th round pick.
Yeah, they traded down and acquired it. How did that work again?
I'll have to
check. They traded up along with Lauko for Vinny Lettieri.
Let's see.
The 110th pick.
That sounds right. Yeah, that was the pick they jumped up and snagged from Minnesota.
Yeah. So, what I have seen of him, and, I was able to get an isolation tape and some highlights, is a defenseman who already has a well-advanced defensive game. And I know that the Bruins firmly believe that there's offensive potential there. I'm just not sure how much, but they believe there's some there. He too is going to Quinnipiac. So it's a good program where he'll continue to develop defensively, and they'll bring out what there is offensively out of him there. I'm not sure that he's going to get. I'm pretty sure he's not going to get the quality offensive starts in his first year, but you never know. He could show enough. But I don't think he'll be getting PP time or a lot of it, and the best offensive opportunities. And because his defensive game is where it is, he'll be tasked with taking more of the defensive responsibilities.
Yeah, and he came out to the development camp back in whatever it was, July. And he looked great for, again, being a rookie, having never been to a pro camp before or any of that stuff. So we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Obviously, that's we like to do that here in Boston. He's 18, so you got to have a little bit of patience with him. He's going to play, I would say, probably 2, maybe 3 years at Quinnipiac, or at least in the NCAA. He might even see all 4 years there, depending on how the Bruins view him. Right now, the Bruins have some prospect depth on the left side. You've got Frederic Brunet, you've got Jackson Edwards, who are already going to be in Providence. And, a guy like Jackson Edwards fits the bottom pairing role that you're going to need probably a little bit better than Elliott Groenewold does in the shorter term. So, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. You can never have too much depth on defense, though. And so, first off, I don't want to see them just trade the guy. I want to see where he's at in 2 years, 3 years. Like you said, Quinnipiac is a fantastic NCAA program. So, being that he was just drafted this year, it's going to be fun to watch how he develops and to see where his first year takes him. And then that really is going to be exemplified by that year 1 to year 2 in college.
Yep.
How do they use him different in that second year? So, speaking of that, I don't want to say second year of college, but in this case, he's going into his third year of college. Up next on your list, we have Providence College goaltender Philip Svedeback, who had a little bit of a setback last year.
Yeah, it was. You know what? I'm just gonna come out and say it because this is the truth. The Bruins need to hit on him. They do, because what once looked like a promising prospect pool is now looking like they need bodies, because Brandon Bussey, if Korpisalo makes the Boston roster, Bussey could get claimed on waivers. DiPietro could get claimed on waivers. And then you've got 2 guys on AHL contracts and Philip Svedeback as your goaltenders.
Yeah.
So they need to hit on him. I was in some cases he put up better numbers. In a lot of cases, he was playing on a team that didn't give up a lot of shots, and his numbers went down, and it looked to me like a lot of times he was struggling to maintain his position, whether it would be like for pucks in tight and he had to get down low. He wasn't tracking properly. He wasn't in his reverse VH tight enough and was leaving room up against the post. He wasn't playing his angles perfectly on shots coming down the wing. And I know it's hard for the developmental coach, goaltending coach. His name escapes me right now.
It's not Bob Asenza, though.
No. It'll come to me in a minute. He doesn't get to work with him a lot while he's in college, but he needs to get those things back, and hopefully whoever his off-season goaltending coach is,
Mike Dunham?
Mike Dunham, that's it. Worked on with him through the summer, and he'll get back to it, because the Bruins can't miss on him. They need him, and they're missing draft picks next year. So to go out and use one on a goaltender kind of hurts you. So, which is why I'm really surprised they gave up on Reed Dick.
Yeah. I don't know if you've learned more about what had Reed Dick walk away from the Bruins, whether contracts were extended or not. And yes, Bear Force was asking the same thing, Dunham, as the coach that we were talking about. I will say this, the one, I guess, bright spot, hopefully, and we're not going to turn this into an hour-long discussion about the Jeremy Swayman contract. You and I both believe that it'll get done. So generally speaking, the idea that you have Jeremy Swayman here for the foreseeable future and beyond, and now you have Joonas Korpisalo signed for this year and then 3 more. The good thing is you don't need a goaltender to be ready next year. You need AHL guys. You need someone who can come up as a number 3, but you don't need your next the guy player until ideally Swayman retires. So there's a positive there that, you don't need Svedeback to be an otherworldly goaltender. You don't need him to be, you need him to be NHL caliber.
You need a Korpisalo replacement when his contract expires.
Exactly. And Svedeback he's going into his 3rd year in the NCAA. The good thing is both seasons that he's had, he's been right around that 900 save percentage, between 2 and 2.5 in goals against average, 34 and 35 starts in those 2 seasons. So we'll have to see what this year brings for him. Hopefully a little bit more consistency than he had last year. But if he can maintain that level of play in the NCAA and then in the American Hockey League and then bring it to the NHL, even if he keeps those exact same numbers, you'll take it as a number 2 behind Swayman. Cameron asks, with Reed Dick, do the Bruins even have any Western Canada scouts?
Yeah, Dean Malcock.
Yeah, and I think there was some writing on the wall for Reed Dick. He knew that his path to the NHL in Boston, he really had to go and push his way past Korpisalo, past Bussy, past DiPietro. Like, he had a lot of names to work with and jump over, which is one of the things that we were talking about before. So I don't know if there was no contract extended to him or if he turned it down, decided to walk away. He has a chance now in the Utah Hockey Club camp to show off what he can do. That maintains to see whether or not the Bruins were at least correct on him in taking him overall in the first place. Swayman, I don't think was someone they expected to hit this high on. And so it kind of threw a few things off, not in a negative way. And then Mike says the Bruins' ability to draft and develop goaltenders has got to be up there with the best in the league. So that's kind of where I'm getting at. You have great goaltending coaches. So
yeah, but I don't know. They drafted Swayman. They never drafted Rask. They never drafted Thomas. The last goaltender that they drafted to play in the NHL, Daniel Vladar, is a backup. Malcolm Subban.
He's over in Springfield. He's an AHL guy.
You got to go back to Andrew Raycroft before that.
I do want to put a little bit of an asterisk next to Malcolm Subban, though, because he was never the same after he broke his larynx. I think that messed with him for quite some time, mentally, in net. Once he took that puck to the throat, he was just never the same goalie.
I don't know.
But yes, it's important, as you said, that they hit on Svedeback to a degree where he can play National Hockey League games, back up, ideally, Jeremy Swayman. You would hope that he can show a starter potential and that when you are able to move on from him, you're able to get something in return and just need a backup because you still have Swayman. That's the hope, at least. Let's see. After Svedeback, we have Jonathan Morello up next.
Okay, another guy I saw a few times with St. Mike's in the OJHL. Got to give credit though to Bob Weddick, the Bruins Ontario scout here, for Letourneau, Matthew Patra. Morello. He obviously saw a lot of Morello this year. Jackson Edward, another guy. Like, he's Bob Weddick as their Ontario scout is doing some fine work for the Bruins here. So But back to Morello. I was asked a lot about him. If the Bruins could draft him in the 5th round, and it's like, no, not going to happen, not going to happen. And it's not because I didn't like him. It's because I thought the guy would be a late 3rd round pick. So the Bruins got him, what's a late 3rd?
They got him
120. Yeah, so they got him 35, 40 picks later. I love the guy. Excellent two-way player. Very well defined defensively already. He's going to a good program with the Fighting Saints in the USHL for a year, and then
he's committed to Clarkson.
Is he going to Clarkson? No. That changed because he went into the portal and switched. I think he's going to BC.
Right. That's right. That sounds right. That sounds about right. I remember someone switching, and I thought it was Pelosi for some reason, but no, I think it was Morello.
I think he's going to BC. But what I really, really like about Morello is that when the games mean something, he steps up. He went from a point per game player in the regular season for St. Mike's to 2 points per game in the playoffs. So when the games mean something, he's a player. He's what I call a Jerry Cheevers type player. Money player, comes up for the big games. And I was shocked that he was there when the Bruins picked in the 5th round. Absolutely shocked.
Yeah. Again, we're getting younger and younger in some of these prospects, so the time frame to expect them is going to be longer and longer. This is the kind of steal, though, that you hope to get in a 5th round. This is the kind of player that when you're not drafting, but 54th overall is your first pick on average, you hope he falls to you. And the fact that, he did fall to the Bruins, you got to be patient with him. But, like you said, his defensive game is solid already. So let's see how that offense continues to produce. We know we can do it. Like you said, when the games matter most, he's at his best. So let's see, he's 18. Like, let's let him get through, a year of college. So you're talking debut first, college for a year or two, literally 3 years away at a minimum. Like he's not going to go from the USHL all the way up to the NHL in one season. So, there's ceiling there for sure. Just again, another guy to just watch as he continues to play and know that he's coming down the road, and, Coyle, enjoy him now, but maybe down the road you have Jonathan Morello as his replacement. It's a project. It's a long-term thing. It's the whole looking 4 or 5 years down the road. That's what Jonathan Morello is. That's what a bunch of these next guys, most of them are at least. Let me just go back to our graphic here. Was there anything else you had on Morello?
No, it's just I'm just going to tell everybody, if you get a chance to watch USHL games, watch them, because you'll like his complete game. Absolutely will.
Yeah, and another guy who drafted this season or this past year, 2024, 6th round, big body defenseman Loke Johansson. Right now, you have him projected again in that makes the NHL kind of projection. But again, if you get 50 to 100 games out of a 186th overall pick, you take that. And, he's a guy who can skate, has some mobility, but still has to work on aspects of his game. Again,
Yeah.
Fully expect that from an 18-year-old kid, though. I'm not like panicked over it.
Yeah. First thing I want to clear up here, because I've heard his name pronounced a million different ways. So I asked a couple of Swedish friends, and there's two ways of pronouncing it. Like if you pronounce it Loki, it's Loki, but his name is pronounced Loke or Luca.
Okay.
So
Appreciate the
there's
clarification on that.
Yeah, there's two ways of pronouncing his name in Sweden. I believe in Moncton they call him Loke. So that's what we're gonna go with.
Okay.
Okay, look. He's played in 3 exhibition games so far for the Moncton Wildcats. By the way, if you guys want to watch them, if you go on YouTube and find the Moncton Wildcats page, the 3 exhibition games are there. There's no play-by-play announcement, but you can watch him. He's number 25. Now, I love his skating ability. He's such a natural. He's a big body. He's physical. I see he's going to need some time adjusting to the smaller ice surface on several occasions. I mean, multiple occasions. You can see his teammates telling him where to line up for faceoffs. Because he's either too far, which would work on the larger ice surface, or he's just right out of position. And watching him try to close gaps, he's not reading it right because everything comes at you. Obviously, it's just junior, and he has some experience in Sweden's second pro league, the Allsvenskan. But even though it's junior, the game still comes at you faster, much faster on the smaller ice. So I can see he was struggling with that. And he's misfiring on a lot of his passes. I actually think he needs to play with a longer stick. I think his stick is too short. But the physicality is there. So this, like Chris said, long-term project, very long. But, he's got, I think, 2 years of junior eligibility left where he can play in the queue. And then because he was drafted from Sweden, the Bruins have 4 years to sign him.
That's after the junior years.
Yeah. No, that's counting right now.
Okay.
So
just making sure.
Maybe by then CHL players are allowed to play in the NCAA, because based on what I'm seeing on just these exhibition games, he's going to need more than 2 years to turn pro, and that's even at the Providence level.
Yeah, I do think we'll see some projections change based off of NCAA and the CHL agreement potentially changing. I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later. It's more of a year or two away kind of a thing versus a 6 or 7 year away kind of a thing. And that may help a guy like Johansson because, like you said, he's more than just the 2 years away. Obviously, if they have 4 years until they have to sign him, if by that time you can send him from 2 years in juniors to 4 years in college, then he gets 2 in junior, 2 in college, then you can sign him to his ELC, and you basically have 3 more years with him. Of course, some of that might change based off of, the Players Association renegotiating stuff. So, it's far enough out there that things could change, but based on where he's at and where your needs are, you can adjust with him. You truly can.
Yeah. I just want to see how he progresses this year.
Exactly.
You know, if we continue to see the smaller ice being an issue halfway through the season, then you got to question whether he's made for the smaller ice. Because you should be starting to see the adjustment at least halfway through the season.
Yeah, he's one where you're going to want to see, like, again, if you're not going to watch every single one of his games, and we don't expect you to, it's if you're going to pick some of his games to watch, pick one in the beginning, pick one or two towards the middle of the year, and pick one or two towards the end of the year. That way there you can see some progression in, like you said, the decision making, the puck handling decisions, the speed of the game, those types of things. Obviously, I know you'll keep an eye out as to whether or not he gets a longer stick. It's you just want to see some progression from game one to the last game of the year.
Yeah.
To know he's on the right path. Like you said, to know he can adjust to the ice size. That's a big thing for some players. Some players,
sure it is.
Doesn't matter. Some players, it matters drastically. So hopefully he learns it very quickly.
But he's such a smooth skater, though. Yeah, his skating's a huge asset.
I was going to say the skating won't be the problem. It's everything else around the smaller sheet of ice. So after Johansson, we have Mason Langenbrunner, who he was drafted back in 2020. So they've had him under team control for a couple of seasons now. Right now he is with Harvard, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
Langenbrunner is with Harvard. And
Okay.
it's not been the best of situations. Not a great team. You talk about a guy who can skate. Langenbrunner can skate. I know there were a lot of Bruins fans upset because he's the son of Jamie Langenbrunner, now assistant general manager of the Bruins. But, 5th round pick in 2020, he was always going to be a project. Skating was great, had the tools, but very, very green, very, very long-term project. Unfortunately, in Harvard, this is what I saw last season. A player that was trying to do too much because the team was bad, and trying to do it himself. And in turn, it probably hurt his stock because, he wasn't playing with the greatest of teammates, like a Groenewold will be playing with, for an example. So at this point in time, he might get a cup of coffee in the NHL somewhere. But I don't see an NHL career. Harvard's going to have to be a much better team, and he's going to have to play to his identity, which is strong defensively, great skater, can move the puck, get it in transition, and moving the other way. Whereas it's hard to say what he is at this point because he's just trying to do everything.
Yeah, he's in a bit of a spot. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a similar season out of him from last year, and then maybe he decides to enter that transfer portal. He's obviously got some intelligent people in his inner circle who can kind of help him make those decisions. We'll have to see where that goes. Like you said, when you're in that kind of situation, sometimes the best thing you can do is to find a new one. Sometimes
Yeah, I
it's
kind of wish he did it this year, Chris, to be honest with you.
Yeah, given how last year went, it would have been nice to see. It's at least in the college game where you have a little bit more turnover year over year. It's understandable for a player to look at it and say, "What's one more year of trying to make it work?
Right.
What adjustments can I make to try to make this a better situation?" And then from there, going, "Okay, this isn't getting any better. I need to do what's right for me now," because at that point he'll have given it 3 seasons,
Yeah.
and that's where you really have to look at your future and say, what does my future look like if I stay here? And what does it look like if I go somewhere else? Where can I go? We have another guy coming up on the list in just a couple names who entered the portal this year for a very similar reason. And we'll come back to him in just a minute. Ian jumps in. He says, I think Johnson will take the second line right wing spot. I think he's talking about Tyler Johnson. So we'll address that on Tuesday's show when we're talking about the NHL Bruins. All right, Ian, bring that comment to Tuesday's show and we can talk more about the lineup for the upcoming season at the NHL level. Did you have any other thoughts, Dom, on Mason Langenbrunner, though?
No, I know it was a little bit harsh, but it is what it is, and
it's the honesty that you get from us here.
Yeah.
So up next on your list here, you have Jake Schmaltz. Jake Schmaltz, if people don't remember, he was a 2019 7th rounder, so he was drafted 192 overall. Another guy, left wing centerman, left shot, 6'2", $180, $190. Definitely a project guy, entering now his 4th season at the University of North Dakota. Obviously very low on this list for you, Dom, as far as an NHL career. What are we looking for from him for this year for the Bruins?
Well, if you thought I was harsh with Langenbrunner, apologies to Jake Schmaltz. But, he showed offensive ability in the USHL. He went to North Dakota and in his freshman year showed that he could provide offense at the NCAA level. And then it went downhill. I mean, he scored 1 goal last season. Now, mind you, he was stuck in a third-line center role and taken a lot of the defensive responsibility. Really wasn't given a lot offensively. But that's what needs developing in him right now. His defensive game has always been there. Is it enough to earn an NHL contract? And I don't believe it is. I mean, they've already got guys at the Providence level and above him on this list that are just as good defensively and will be filling that role. So why even sign him to a contract and burn up a contract spot? That's my belief with Jake Schmaltz.
Yeah, he's someone that obviously you don't root for anybody to fail. You just don't.
No.
And especially a guy who is a late round pick, 7th, like I said, rounder, 192 overall. There is something there. But to your point, on this team, I don't see it. Using that contract spot doesn't make a lot of sense for a guy like Schmaltz, at least this Schmaltz. Now, maybe if you can keep him around, you might be able to entice his cousin or both of them, in Nick Schmaltz out of Utah, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it's not a feasible thing. You unless you know that it's likely to happen, you don't really people of families just have different careers, and it's okay. So it's I just don't know if I really see it, at least with the Bruins. And real quick, Ian, no need to apologize. I just want to make sure that for this show, we get through all of our prospect stuff, all the prospect questions that anybody has. And obviously, we want to talk about how the Tyler Johnson PTO will affect the Bruins and so forth. That's why we're separating the two shows, so we can keep an eye on the Boston Bruins and keep an eye on all the prospects, because people have questions for both. So if we streamline the questions to the right shows from the beginning, everybody wins. Everybody gets to get all their questions answered. We also got Court jumping in as well, so hopefully he's doing well.
Court.
And definitely a good follow for other coverage as well. Did you have anything else on Schmaltz?
No.
Okay.
No.
So up next is Ty Gallagher, who, like I mentioned before, he is the one that has gone back into the transfer portal in the NCAA. He has played the last couple seasons at was it BU, Boston University?
Yeah, with Jay Pandolfo as coach.
And for some reason last year they decided to go with more of a 7 defenseman system. It wasn't the right fit for him.
He didn't get a lot of ice time and a lot of quality ice time. And I really, really hated putting him this low because he's always shown potential, whether it was at the USHL level or the NCAA level until last season. And I don't know if he just got into Pandolfo's doghouse or what it was. So now I had to put him so low because now I have to see whether it was Gallagher or whether it was an issue that Pandolfo had with him. And we won't know until he laces up the skates with Colorado College this year.
Yeah,
and how he rebounds, right?
Exactly. I'm glad to see him in a new setting because it, like you said, it's going to solve and answer those questions for us. Ty Gallagher has looked good in the last couple development camps. He is a right shot defenseman, which is something that this team does need, not right away, but he's got one more year of college, at least, if I remember correctly. This will be his last year in college. He's fighting for the chance to play in Providence now. And if he goes to Colorado and he shows what he has shown in the past at BU, and that whatever that 7 defenseman system was that Pandolfo put in place just wasn't the right thing for him, then yeah, you might be looking at him in Providence next year with Bavaro, with Mast, other guys that we'll talk about in the coming weeks. And that's okay. That's a good thing. I mean, for a 7th round draft pick, he is exactly what you're looking for. Someone who's trying to claw his way to the NHL. And he's done a great job of it until last year. So I'm very excited to see how he does in Colorado College and what that new scenery will do for him, because he does deserve it. He's earned that. Hopefully it goes well for him, and then Langenbrunner can follow in the footsteps going into next year if he needs to.
Exactly. I've always liked him. It's the talent is there. Now it's just proving the coach was wrong.
Yeah, and he has an opportunity to do that. So I'm happy that he has the opportunity. And based off of, again, that depth that the Bruins have on the right side, he could make it for this team. So he's someone that you want to watch in his new home in Colorado College and just hope that he can fill in that hole in 2-3 years. He's one that, if it all goes right, could be that Andrew Peak replacement.
Right. Right.
And that's what I'm rooting for that for him, because you have a couple years left of Andrew Peak. Gallagher would fit the timeline perfectly, and I think he can do it. So I'm rooting for him to do it. We'll see how this year goes for him. And then up after Ty Gallagher, we have Casper Nassen. I will let you have the floor on Mr. Nassen over here.
Okay, so here's the thing. J20 player in Sweden, following in the steps of Jellvik and Locmelis. Coming to North America, will be going the NCAA route, the same as they did. Should have, now, mind you, Nason's a 7th round pick, where Jellvik and Locmelis were 4th and 5th.
I believe so, yeah.
So he should have had the same production as the two of them last season in the J20. And I'll tell you what, he had an absolutely horrific first half start. It was terrible. And I was ready to write him off. And then in the second half, he picked it up, the second half in the playoffs. And, had he played that pace all year, he would have outperformed both Jellvik and Locmelis. So he's going to Miami University. Can play all 3 forward positions, but he's a right shot who is better on the left side. He's just one of those guys that, I don't know, is much better on his off wing than his strong side. And he's a better left winger than he is a centerman. So we'll see just exactly how they're going to use him. I think he's going to be one that's going to take a little bit longer to transition to the North American ice. It's going to be, how does he do in year 2 and year 3? But again, a 7th round pick, the type of player you want to take a flyer on and hope that you get something out of him.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously seeing how he makes that adjustment to the college game will be very telling as to what he's able to do. I don't have a ton to add on Nassen, just because, again, I haven't had a lot of a chance to watch him over in Sweden. I unfortunately don't have those same connections to the Swedish leagues. But we'll see what he can do in the NCAA and how he can adjust. I'm looking forward to seeing him with Miami, I think it was, you said?
Yeah.
So college hockey's come a long way overall anyway. I'm a bit more excited to see how this next player does, because, I've had my eye on him for 2 development camps this year, and there is a bunch of work he has to do to his game still, but there has been improvement. So our second to last player for tonight is Kristian Kostadinski. Now, coming into last year, we already knew he was going to be a project, and anyone who tells you otherwise is just full of shit. All right. Now, that being said, he is someone who has been and is willing to put the work in. I know you've heard me tell the story numerous times. Andrew and I were at the development camp 2 years ago. We watched him go off on the side to work one-on-one. I believe it was with Adam McQuaid specifically, and they were working on his skating. One of the biggest issues that he had to work on was stopping, ironically. But this dude weighs in. I mean, he's a big body defenseman. 6'6", 220, and he's only 19 years old. So as a 7th round draft pick, you have time and you have the ability to be patient with him. This is a guy that if you can end it, like the one pairing I would not want to face the Bruins in 4 years with would be Jackson Edwards and Kristian Kostadinski on the same pairing. Because
Exactly.
my God, am I going to get injured playing against that pairing if they can both get there. Kristian Kostadinski has a lot of work to do on his skating, but
It's improved though, Chris. It has, but he's got a ways to go.
Yes, and he's with Dubuque this year, if I recall correctly. So we'll see how it goes from the Swedish 19-year-olds to Dubuque now.
They have their own skating coach, skills and skating coach with the Fighting Saints. So he's going to get some firsthand or on-hands coaching down at that level too.
And he needs it. And I don't say that to be demeaning to him. I say that to mean like he has shown the effort. Like I said, he was working with the coaches one-on-one, and you could hear some of the conversation. Yes, it was a little humorous to make sure, like this, am I stopping correctly? And that sort of thing. But it shows that he cares enough to try and that he wants to get better. And so that nothing beats a player who wants to be coached. And when you
now I will say this:
a big body like that as a defenseman, you damn well do your best to try to make it so he can help make it to the NHL.
I will say this: I watched his, which will come up to bring us to Dan's question here. I watched him in an exhibition game Friday night, I believe it was, and there's some work to be done. He had some struggles. I think a lot of it was more to do with the smaller ice surface than anything. But you would figure with the skating, the smaller ice surface would be easier for him because he doesn't have as far to go. But Dan, to answer your question, with defensemen, it's a lot of things. It's being able to switch from forward to backward skating effortlessly and smoothly and without losing speed. It's about your edge work. It's about your crossovers, your ability to stop and start on a dime, all sorts of things. And he needs work on all of them. His crossovers 2 years ago were horrific. I don't think they even existed. But last year you began to see them. So there is improvement. Like Chris said, he's willing to put in the effort and the hard work, and it's going to take hard work for him, especially a player his size and carrying around his weight. So I think he can get there just because he wants to be coached.
Yeah. And, like Dan said, so the fundamentals, exactly. He needs to work on the fundamentals. And one thing that I noticed this year versus last year, it's almost like last year at camp, the ability just wasn't there. He didn't know what to do. This year, he knew what he had to do, and he was so laser focused on doing it. And then he got so down on himself when he knew he didn't do it correctly. And there were so many times where I even stopped and looked, and, when it was just a skating drill, he made more mistakes. Once you put the puck back on his stick and he had other things to think about, he showed he knows what he needs to do. It's just a matter of now of getting better at it so that it's second nature to him. And it might take another year or 2 or 3 to get him there, but we're not talking about a 24-year-old defenseman. We're talking about a kid who's 19. You have that time to get it to him in his brain so he doesn't have to think about it with or without the puck. He can make that transition from forward skating to backward skating. Like, he has a physical ability that he can bring to the NHL level, and he's not a bad puck mover either. Like he can have some vision with that first breakout pass and covering guys. Like he's not
The
bad
brain
at
is
those
there.
things.
The brain is there.
Right. So it's just a matter of getting the feet to match what the brain can see. And he's got time to work on it. I'm excited to see him hopefully get there in a couple years. Again, timeline still TBD. But he's trying. He's going for the coaching. The coaching is getting to him. And that's all you can ask for a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's committed to Boston College or whether he's committed to a college yet. I might have missed it, but I think he's going to end up going to Boston College too.
I was going to say, I don't know if anything's been officially announced for him, but he is definitely one that I can see stay in the Boston area, whether it's BU, BC, even like I don't see a Quinnipiac in him, but maybe somewhere where the Bruins can keep a close enough eye on him, and really work with him. Dan, stay tuned. In a couple episodes, we are going to be talking about all the guys who are in Providence this year, and Jackson Edwards is on that list, and I'm excited for us to talk about him coming up as well. When you think Jackson Edwards, think Kristian Kostadinski, but on the other side. And Edward is obviously a better skater now. Last but not least, on your list, we have Roman Bichkov, Russian left shot defenseman. Clearly based off of the ranking here, not someone we'll say who projects to be high in the NHL based on your
and I've had him really low for a couple of years now, just because he can't even crack a KHL lineup. So if he can't crack a KHL lineup, he's not cracking an NHL lineup. Look, I've had this debate with people much smarter than me for years, that you cannot put too much emphasis on one tournament, i.e. Ole Jellvik or, drafted, what was he, 5th overall because of a great World Junior Championships.
He was 5th round 2019.
Not Jellvik. The one that went the same draft as Laine, the 4 Finns or the 3 Finns.
Let me pull that up.
Yeah, Jellvik.
The 2016 draft?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Laine. And then Pool Party. Puljujärvi.
Yep. That was the 2016 draft. So Matthews went 1, Laine, Dubois, Puljujärvi, Ollie Jellvik,
That's
and then
him.
Matthew Tkachuk.
Where's like you Puljujärvi and Jellvik are 2 examples of why you can't put too much into one tournament.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with Roman Bichkov. Now, he was a 5th round pick, so it's not that big a deal, but he did have a good World Junior Championships for Russia, and the Bruins thought that they would take a chance on him, and he has been unable to crack a KHL lineup. I mean, he spent the first couple of years after being drafted in Russia's junior league, the MHL, has miraculously had a KHL contract with, I believe, 4 different teams now, but has never been able to move up past the VHL, which is their equivalent of the American Hockey League.
He got 10 games last year for Yaroslav Lokomotiv,
Yeah.
but he didn't put up a single point.
No.
So he's bouncing around the leagues of Russia. His best season, he posted 26 points in 62 games in the MHL juniors back in 1920.
What did he have at the World Juniors? I think it was 3 points in 5 games.
3 assists in 7 games.
Yeah,
for
7
Russia
games.
U20 in 2021.
Yeah, and he did have a good tournament. He did. I will admit that, but that's all it was.
Yeah, and that was the year that Trevor Zegras went off for 18 points in 7 games. You had Dylan Cousins, Anton Lundell, JJ Petarka, you had plenty of other guys going off way more than him, and yet for some reason, like you said, it was a 5th round pick, so I'm not gonna get too all upset about it, but it just doesn't help. Now, Mike does have a great question here. He says, do you think the pandemic could have derailed some of the prospects' development? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely did.
Yeah. I still think Jake Schmaltz is entitled to go a 5th season if he wants to in the NCAA. By the way, the NCAA is talking about going 5 years anyway. There's a lot of talk about that, but most definitely the pandemic hurt some of these players, and others it did miracles for.
Right. And I will say this for Beachcoff, though, if you go back and look at some of his numbers, they were not fantastic before that. The 18-19 season in the MHL, 15 points in 40 games, 0 points in a playoff game. Like I said, 26 points in 62 games in the years of the 2019-2020 season going into the year of the pandemic. So yeah, I would say it certainly hurt him in the 2020 to 2021 season where he posted 4 points in 25 games, but he wasn't lighting it up before that either. He also had 52 penalty minutes. So could you have had something I can understand taking a 5th round flyer on the guy. He has had good movement with the puck. He's not uncomfortable carrying the puck places. He's not a terrible player, but again, it's just not one of those things where it just looks like it's going to translate at this point.
Yeah, I don't think it ever did, which is, like both said it. Yeah, it's a 5th round pick, so it's okay, but I'd rather take a flyer on a player that at least has shown something throughout rather than something at just one tournament.
Right. 100%. 100%. And Ian, I think everybody wishes that the Boston Bruins tickets were the price of Providence Bruins tickets because it would be a lot better for us. It also means that the Providence tickets would be a little less too. I'd be okay with that. So,
yeah.
Anyway, Dom.
So if anybody's got any questions, throw them our way and we'll do our best to answer them. Just Tuesday night, we're going to do our regular Boston Bruins show. Like we said, last week, hopefully we'll have a Swayman contract we can talk about instead of something else. And we'll get back to Ian's comment about Tyler Johnson on Tuesday night. And I promise I won't lose my temper like I did last week's show. And
people enjoyed it, Dom.
drop the F-bomb once or twice. And then next week on this show, we'll go through these players again, and we're going to give you what their expected production is going to look like for this upcoming season.
Based on your model. I want to be clear about that.
Based on my model.
The model that you have that has been proven to work.
Yeah.
More often than not. It's quite accurate. So I'm looking forward to going through that. And then the week after that, like you said, we'll go through some of those Providence players. Mike says, when you talk about the Providence players, I'd like to hear your thoughts on whether Mark McLaughlin will see games with the big club this year or if there's too many guys ahead of him. Great question, Mike. And we are going to get to Providence. Some of what's pushing that off for us is as we get into training camp, we want to see who we think will actually be in Providence. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, a great player, as an example, Matthew Poitras. If we start talking about him like he's going to make the big club and then he doesn't and he goes down to Providence, that changes the Providence conversation. And so we want to have a little bit more clarity on what the Providence roster is going to look like, because then we'll also run into the questions of who might get cut from the big club and have to go through waivers, i.e. a Brandon Bussey or a DiPietro. If they get cut, when they get cut, what is the likelihood of them clearing waivers and getting through to Providence versus getting claimed? Because, again, Bussey's a great example because now you got Vancouver looking for some added depth in goal. And if I'm Vancouver, I'm salivating over a guy like Brandon Bussey possibly being available for absolutely nothing if my current goaltending situation is as big of a question mark as it is. So we want to make sure we talk about him as accurately as we can. And we have these other things that we can go over. Ian, we absolutely appreciate that. We love we're well over 350 people watching right now. So we love the questions. Dom, do you have any other things to get to? I want to give some people some time to write in some last minute questions here. Again, the show will be on YouTube when we're done. It will be available for download through any podcast channel. Just follow the What's Brewing channel. If you can't find it, you should also be able to search the Dom.Hockey podcast name and have them both come up. They are through one channel. We have some other exciting things that we're working on. We are working on the details for some Patreon work as well. So we'll kind of throw that out there right now. If you have some ideas, we're open to them. You can DM us. You can email us. Trust me, you can find us on X, Twitter. So we appreciate the thoughts there. David says, where should the Bruins focus in recruiting money and time, i.e. NCAA, OHL, WHL, European leagues? Where are the Bruins' current scouting staff deployed?
That's an excellent question.
That is the exact kind of question we want to have on this show.
Yeah, that's a marvelous question. So I can tell you now, and most people listening will not believe this, but the Bruins have one of the largest scouting departments in the NHL. They do. They have everything covered. There's even a scout in Russia. So the difficult question is where should they focus on and spend their money on? The money should be spent everywhere. Like Jeremy Jacobs is a multi-billionaire. The Bruins are one of half a dozen teams that print money. And when you have a salary cap and you can't outspend everybody else on the ice with the product on the ice, what you can do is outspend them in things like scouting, development, and that type of thing. And the Bruins are obviously spending the money there. Where they should focus on everything. I do believe that the draft is cyclical. So you may concentrate on Europe 1 year or the NCAA in Europe, where you've got a large prospect pool where you can afford to wait 4 years to bring them in, or you've got a very small prospect pool that you need to fill in quickly, and you go the CHL route where you have to sign players within 2 years. So I think we've seen with the Bruins over the years that is cyclical. We know that the main roster in Providence is kind of full right now, which is why we see a bunch of guys in the NCAA. I think it's 11 total prospects in the NCAA, Chris. Maybe it's more.
I'd have to go back and count, but it's a significant number overall.
Yeah. So in a couple of years, that'll change. Where you'll see that is, again, if the whole CHL players in the NCAA rule hasn't changed, but we'll start to see over the next couple of years more CHL players brought in because of the time span to get to the pro level.
Yeah,
but I do believe the Bruins are spending their money wisely.
Yeah, they're definitely, the Jacobs get accused of being cheap far too frequently. They definitely do their job in spending to the cap and investing in resources. Warrior Ice Arena is a state-of-the-art facility. If you've never been, I highly recommend at least going and just walking around the public area, watching a development camp for a day, something like that, and you'll see exactly what I mean when you just walk in and you know that it is a facility that players want to come to train at. So they have that going for them as far as the time and money to where to invest and deploy scouts and stuff like that. Ever since Don Sweeney took over, I know you and I have had this conversation ad nauseum sometimes because so many people want to dwell on the 2015 draft and Don Sweeney's draft history, which gets vastly overlooked as to just how good it has gotten over the last almost 10 years. Now, it was not perfect to begin with.
No. But you got to remember,
the department has changed drastically as well.
Yeah. That was not Don Sweeney's scouting department. That was Peter Chiarelli's. Let me tell you a story real quickly. Every once in a while, folks, Chris allows me to tell a story. Not too often, but they're usually pretty good, right, Chris?
I love hearing your stories, Dom. We can end every episode with a Dom story.
I used to be in OHL rinks every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon, every week, without failure. And Mike Chiarelli, who was Peter Chiarelli's brother, was the Bruins OHL scout. Okay. In 4 years, do you know how many times I saw Mike Chiarelli in a rink?
I think I know the answer.
Just
so
bumped it. The answer is once in 4 years. In what is it? I think 5 or 6 years that Bob Weddick has been the Bruins OHL scout. I see him in a rink once a week last year and the year before and the year before that. So it goes from once every 4 years to seeing the scout once a week. So he's making the rounds. He's not just going to the OHL. He's going to the OJHL, the Junior A leagues. He's even getting looks at players in under 17 and under 18 leagues before they're even draft eligible. So he does his homework.
And it's showing in the drafting. Now, Mike has another great question here where he asks, do scouts just watch undrafted players or do they also speak with them off the ice to get a sense of character? Is this allowed? Dom, I'll expand that to what sort of interaction can scouts have with players after they've been drafted, prior to being drafted, so on?
Yes, they're allowed to talk to them. There's was it? I believe it was, well, it had to be last year. So I'm in London one day, and our media entrance, the entrance we have to go through to get to our spots, goes right by both dressing rooms. And as I'm walking in, who do I see talking to Jackson Edward? None other than Adam McQuaid. So not only do the scouts get there, but the development guys from the Bruins get there. At one time it was Jamie Langenbrunner. Now it's Adam McQuaid. So he makes the rounds. They will talk to the coaches of the team. They will talk to the player, like the scouts will. They're getting all sorts of information from anyone they can. A lot of times it's the general manager, because the general manager is right there. With the Knights, it's kind of hard because Dale Hunter's behind the bench, and Mark Hunter, who is the GM, is sometimes back there. But there is associate GM. Rob Simpson is fantastic. Easy guy to approach. I can pick up the phone and call him anytime, and he's more than willing to talk to you about players. So I'm sure if an NHL team or scout is calling, they're talking.
Yeah, and that's obviously how you want to assess a player's character. You know, how are they off the ice, that kind of thing. And that's the best way to do it, to have those conversations with the people around them, with the player himself. There was another great question from David. Why has the QHL fallen off?
I don't think it's fallen off. I think it's always been what you're not getting is you're not getting the Mario Lemieux and the Pat LaFontaines and those type of players coming out of the queue anymore. But I think the queue has been what it has been for the last 20 years. And that's a lot of it is they don't have the U.S. market to take from, like the OHL and the WHL have. And that hurts, in attracting players. So I don't know. A lot of Canadian players are going the NCAA way.
Yeah.
Connor McDavid was basically last minute before choosing the Erie Otters over going the NCAA route. Connor McDavid was almost an NCAA player.
That would have been phenomenal for the close. NCAA game.
Yeah.
The NCAA has really become a fantastic league to watch. I know, a lot of people think of, the same old teams, the BU, BC, UMaine, North Dakota, those kinds of things. But it's really rounding out right now. Quinnipiac just winning the championship. Michigan has come around quite a ways. And, that was a huge football team for a while, but now they're getting in there with hockey. Mason Lori went to Ohio State, which obviously very well known for its football program. This whole NIL money is going to change the NCAA landscape. it's also going to change it for the hockey development as well, because a lot of players can come down to the end, at least as of right now, where we have to see how the whole juniors qualifying for NCAA, all that changes things. But at least for right now, you can go the college route and make some money with your name and likeness, and then go to the NHL and make even more money. In juniors, you're getting your stipend, you're getting certain other things, but you're not there to make money.
No, in junior, you're getting $50 to $150 biweekly, depending on how many road games you've got in that time.
Right. Now,
So,
I also, if you don't mind, Dom, explaining what else the player gets that they don't directly receive payment for. Are they housed? Are they, those types of
yeah,
details?
they're with billet families. So, but the biggest thing is the scholarship. I'll tell you honestly, most players don't go to the CHL route to become hockey players. They get their scholarship, they play Canadian college hockey, and their education is paid for. That's what the majority of players go to the CHL for. Let's not forget, there's 1,200 CHL players every year, and a handful make it to the NHL. They're not there to be professional hockey players. Most of them are there to get their college education.
And obviously, if now with NIL money, if they want to make it more additional money, they'll go to the NCAA until that changes. And there's, it's all going to change. So rather than get into all the nitty gritties of it at this point, let's see how it continues to evolve and change, because NIL money has come into the equation, eligibilities and all that fun stuff. But, as far as leagues falling off, I think you might see some fluctuation because of, money. But it will, nobody wants to see any of the leagues fold. And so
no, and the CHL will survive. I don't think there'll be that big of an exodus of CHL players to the NCAA. I really don't. You might see players that like, for instance, Matthew Poitras, wasn't eligible to go to the AHL, was too good for the OHL, could have gone to the NCAA for a year and played against older and in some cases bigger players there, right? Where that option wasn't available to him before. I think that's the type of player you're going to see go the NCAA route. Now the question becomes who pays for it.
Right.
Like in the CHL, they're entitled to a 1-year scholarship for every year of service. So if they have 3 CHL seasons in, they get 3 years of college paid for. Now, is that going to transfer to the NCAA? Or in Poitras's case, would the Bruins be paying for that?
That would certainly.
There's so much to figure out, because now the cost to send Poitras to college for 1 year, is that part of the player's share of hockey-related revenue? Because it's going technically to the player. There's so much to figure out. This is not going to happen overnight.
No, it's not. And it's funny how you position that, because, it is kind of funny to sit there and say, because even down here, which school, let's say that's the case, and Boston Bruins do pay for it. Revenue part of the discussion aside, are they going to say, we're going to send you to Quinnipiac because it's less expensive than BC? but we want to send you to BC because we think it's a better fit for you. Like, and then is there a cap? Can they only spend up to a certain amount on the player's college education, regardless of where they go? Like, those are all things. That's the key phrase, collectively bargained.
Mm-hmm. It's not going to be easy. Like, I can guarantee you, the Guelph Storm would not have been too happy with, let's say, paying Patra's tuition at Boston College for a year.
No. And they would have been pissed if he went and played in the AHL.
Right. So, yeah. So now I have to get hold of an OHL contract and see exactly what it specifies. Maybe I'll work on that for the next show, Chris, see if I can get one, because I don't think it specifies Canadian college. I could be wrong on it, but I believe the contract says
that would be a wrinkle.
Yeah, that would be a wrinkle. So anyway, it's going to be a lot of negotiating to get that.
Absolutely. Craig says, love the pods, lads. Thank you. Craig, thank you for the words. We're getting close to the 9 o'clock hour here on the East Coast. We've gone well above the 2-hour mark on this show. Great debut show for the Dom.Hockey Podcast. Again, it'll be found wherever you get pods tomorrow morning. Try to get out there for your morning ride in if you were only able to catch part of it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Like I said, keep an eye out for some announcements for some Patreon stuff we have coming out. A lot of stuff that we have in the works around here for additional hockey coverage. I mean, Dom, do you have any final thoughts here?
No, it was fun. I'm glad we got to do this, and we'll keep doing it because it's such a change from talking Jeremy Swayman and who's going to be the second line right wing, right?
Hey, we'll go back to that on Tuesday, though.
Yes, we'll go back to that Tuesday.
It's weird, though, because normally on our Tuesday show, we sign off with Go Bees. But while these players are still Bruins property, they don't play for the Bruins. So how do we end this one, Dom?
I'm going to end this one with Go BC, because the first three players on the list are Jellvik, Letourneau, and Gasseau.